What's up, guys? Today we're chatting with Jeepster's Cards on Instagram. You might not know him or recognize him because he's not on YouTube, but he's well known around the local vending scene here in North Carolina. And I wanted to have him on today to tell us a little bit about himself, his business, the different parts of your business. And you recently took a trip to Japan. Was it your first time ever going to Japan?
First time out of the country and first time in Japan, and it was for 2 weeks, and it was a very exciting visit, I will say.
That's awesome. And he did some Pokemon card shopping out there. So it's been a little while since I've been out there Pokemon card shopping. So it'd be interesting to hear from someone who's been there recently and kind of maybe compare and contrast both of our experiences. So if you want to start off, just introduce yourself and then kind of let us know your Pokemon journey and when did you first get into it? Did you hop out at any point and where you are at now with it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think everyone started out as a kid with it, right? So, my go-to game back in the day was Pokemon Ruby, Pokemon Emerald. Had a card collection of Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh back when I was a kid, and ended up going the Yu-Gi-Oh route when I was younger, and ended up regretting it a good bit of time later. But based out of Raleigh, North Carolina, and been buying and selling, I guess, since about 2019 now. It's been quite a journey, and I'm trying to remember how it all really got started. And it was right all before COVID as well. That was about the time frame. And at the time, I was working a not so fun 9 to 5 that was manual labor, just making countertops, and ended up finding some interest in just looking at TCG Player, honestly, a little bit more in depth back in the day, and seeing that okay, there's some ways that you can make a nice little living out of it, and so just got started on it that way, and I've taken care of my customers just about as well as I can, and they've taken care of me just about the same for the past 5 years or so now.
Awesome. So you got into Pokemon when you were a kid, like all of us for the most part, and then you went the Yu-Gi-Oh route. Did you fall off at any point? Did you collect Yu-Gi-Oh for a while and then you were just like, you know what, I'm moving on from this, and then
So I collected Yu-Gi-Oh until it got too complex for me in terms of like
okay,
the different kinds of cards. As soon as they had the directional cards, I kind of fell out of them at that point because it was like I'm just used to the fusions, and that's about it, and the tuners and everything. They're nice additions to the game, tournament and playing wise. It's just I fell out of it at that point because it got too much for me.
gotcha. And then 2019, you got back into Pokemon. Did you get back in? Were you watching any YouTube at the time? Was there any interest kind of
At the time, it
created?
was just about Max Mofo, and that was it,
Oh,
before he
nice. Yeah.
started on Cold Ones and everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Back when he was doing his rather, interesting YouTube videos that I quite enjoyed his humor and, his style of making videos, so I started seeing those, and, I didn't really get into the whole pack opening side of it. I really started on just seeing what bulk cards I had left from when I was a kid and seeing what I could do with them on TCG Player and finding small lots like that. Um, YouTube videos at the time, I think there were only, just like a couple of creators back then. It was a totally different landscape compared to what it is now.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot more out there and there's a lot more different segments of it. You got the fun entertainment segment, you got the investing segment, you got the kind of the playable segment, and you got the people doing TCG player versus eBay versus vending versus all that stuff. Um
Vendor POVs and just
yeah,
tons and tons of content now compared to what it used to be.
yeah, absolutely. So you've been doing a lot of vending. When did that start for you? Is that a fairly recent thing or did you start around the same time, or when did you start getting into that?
So let's see, from 2019 to like 2023, I think it was just mainly TCG Player and Instagram, where we ended up buying and selling cards. About 2023, we saw that everyone was kind of coming out of their basements finally from COVID, and we ended up going the same route and started vending at that point just in Raleigh. But then through the next year or two, we ended up expanding to go to basically every show that we could in North Carolina and a little bit outside, like Columbia, South Carolina, and a couple of other places.
Until that time, you've been doing TCG Player. Had that been growing over the 3 years, and then you saw this opportunity to take things more local, or was it like, TCG Player is kinda stagnant, let's shake it up, or what was going on with the business, around that time when you chose to do vending? Was it just an addition?
I think it was just an addition, yeah, because everything was kind of rolling smooth with TCG Player. We were still growing our inventory, and we still constantly are today. But in terms of like vending, I guess we saw it as a more experience orientated way of doing business than just sending messages to people constantly online, or just TCG Player, where you really don't have any interactions with your customers unless it's negative things, right?
Yeah.
And so we saw vending as an opportunity to really just make a more positive impact, both on the community and to really just make more memories with the people that we're doing business with constantly.
Do you feel like there are kind of differences between your vending customers and your TCG player customers? Do they want different things? Is there different
Absolutely,
what are the
absolutely.
kind of different things you see between the vending and the TCG player store?
So anything, the easiest way to put it is there's the above $5 stuff and then there's the below $5 stuff.
Mm,
Like the absolute easiest way to put it. And to kind of break that down further, it's either the vending side of it that really wants just the hollows of some older, vintage sets, the reverse stamps of, what is it, Team Rocket Returns, Legend Maker, all those kind of sets, e-reader reverses, and then you've got the TCG player side of it, which is really more for just the master set builders and a lot of the competitive players. A lot of the stuff that we sell on there, we can tell it's going right into somebody's deck to be played very
mm.
soon. It's either that or somebody's trying to get every reverse hollow from a certain set, and they're just trying to build out their master set binder completely. It's a completely different array of what we've got for people wanting cards.
So maybe more collectors in the vending space and more like actual players in the TCG player side of things.
Yep, absolutely. Yep.
Um, okay, interesting. So for your TCG player, are you doing kind of everything? Like you're doing, a couple dollar trainers, you're doing like low cost stuff as well as kind of higher end cards, or is TCG
We're
player
working
mostly?
we're working to get essentially everything carried over there, but it's weird when you're trying to make sure that like you don't want to go to shows and stuff like that with the same quote unquote stuff as the what you've got carried online, because then you can
Yeah.
have double sales really easily, especially at a large scale, right? And so we're trying to figure out the best way to kind of like break off the points at which we're going to say, okay, this is for TCG player, this is for going to shows. And right now, I could say that like we've got V Maxes, we've got some trainer galleries, lower end trainer galleries on our TCG player, but nothing really big, like over $20, I'd say. But that's currently just modern stuff about XY era all through right now. Slowly trying to get some vintage stuff on there as well.
Okay, cool. And when you're sourcing, are you sourcing at local shows? Or are you mostly sourcing in different places? Are you picking up collections locally? Are you buying stuff online? Are you where do you where are you don't have to say like the sources, but where
Yeah.
I guess are you buying a lot of
I would
stuff?
say it's a really good 50-50 split between online and in-person stuff. I think the buying opportunities, a lot of people can speak for that. At a show, it's much higher than what you can find just immediately speaking compared to what you might end up finding online. But thankfully, since we've been around for so long, it really does help in that fashion that we've got people kind of constantly coming to us saying, "Hey, we've got this list of stuff. What can you help us out with that for?"
Yeah, I guess a big benefit to vending is you actually get to meet people locally, and then those local collections, if they have a positive experience with you, they come to you if they want
Yep,
to sell them and
absolutely.
want to have a good buyer seller experience. So that's that's awesome. So my experience vending is very similar. I really like vending, especially local shows. I'm not huge on the collecticons. I'm not sure if you've done a collecticon yet. They're so big and they feel so kind of more business oriented and transactional and less like you're meeting like the end consumer, like the actual collector who's going to cherish this item, or they're excited to buy it.
Yep.
It's more guys going around, picking 100 cards out of binders, and it's more of like a business What have been your experiences between the locals and the collecticons, if you've had the chance to do any?
So we did Charlotte last year, me
Cool.
personally, and then some other parts of the team that I can't say are with us anymore. They ended up doing Dallas or Houston the year before. I can't remember which one specifically,
Okay.
but both there and my take on like the larger shows compared to the local shows, you definitely see the people that are actually trying to fill out their binders more at local shows compared to, like you were saying, national scale ones. It definitely just boils down to, hey, I want this whole binder, or I want this whole display case. Like, just talk percentages to me, and that's all the
Mhm.
conversation is. It's And I can understand it once it gets to that point. That is how you're making your living. Like, I understand the conversation and all that, but it definitely feels a bit different in the air, and it's not nearly as friendly. Or in my opinion, you make a lot more memories at the local shows that are, really for the collecting behind it, not just the dollar sign behind it.
Yeah, and two, you get those connections from local shows, so local sellers and stuff will come to you. Yeah, I agree. I definitely prefer the local shows. You said you use TCG Player and you vend. Are those the two platforms that you use? Do you do eBay at all, or any of the other selling platforms? Do you have your own website, or is it mostly those two spots?
Mostly just those 2, honestly. We had eBay up for a little bit, but that was for only a year or so back in, like, 2022. And for me, TCG Player, with being a pro seller on there, having the quick list at your advantage, it's very much just the easiest, most efficient way that we've got going for us with the amount of volume of cards that we're trying to get through, at least.
And I haven't done TCG Player, so can you explain what the quick list is? What advantage you have there that you don't have on the other platforms?
Yeah, so it's very I'm sure that eBay has something similar to it, but QuickList is an additional scanning software that they allow you to have once you're a pro seller on there, and it is very similar to the one that you've got, like, on your phone app, but it's just a little bit more fine-tuned to where you're not gonna have to sit there forever for it to recognize. It can scan just about a card every, like, I don't know, 8/10 of a second or something like that. I mean, it's fairly efficient if you've got somebody manning it. So we've just gone that route for the most part with entry. I know that there's other ways that you can, use scanning software or scanning machines and CSV files to import into eBay. Just never really looked into that route before.
So what you're saying is you can use your phone essentially to scan cards to list on TCG Player?
Yeah,
Is that what you're
well,
saying?
so,
Yeah.
the app, I believe for, like, most people that just have a TCG Player account, they can use their phones. QuickList is
Mm.
more so for, like, just a webcam, and you get
Okay.
a couple webcams lined up, a couple different computers, and you can have multiple people scanning in cards at once that way.
And then it just goes into your inventory. You put condition how much you have, and you're good to go.
Yep, as you're scanning it, you'll set, like, what condition it is. So you do have to condition check it before you get started scanning everything, but
Mhm.
it'll recognize sets, and it does cards for more than just Pokemon. It'll do just about, like, 30 or 40 different TCGs, I believe, at this point, but we just mainly use it for Pokemon. We did a little bit of Magic back in the day, a little bit of Yu-Gi-Oh back in the day, but we've just been sticking with Pokemon primarily.
Yeah, that sounds super nice. Especially if you're listing a bunch of stuff, especially if you're listing kind of some lower cost stuff for people for decks and things. That seems like the stuff that you'd want to spend the least amount of time listing. So if you had that tool to your disposal, that would be pretty nice for sure.
Absolutely, yep.
Um, do you grade much at all,
I go in
or
and
is
out
it
of phase.
mostly okay?
I definitely go in and out of phases. We used to grade a whole lot more than it currently is. Ever since all these different companies have started coming out and the overall population of slabs has started just rising and rising and rising over time, I like to just stick with singles primarily at this point, just raw cards. Here and there, I'll still buy slabs. Um, but in terms of like going through all that we've got here and pulling out a whole bunch of stuff to go get graded for potential tens and nines, it, I just don't end up trying to take it, I just don't take that route anymore. Really, with the volume that we're trying to push for just singles, it, I'm okay. I'll just stick to what it is, raw value, and like I can tell people accurately for the most part what it could grade for somebody who's interested in knowing that before they purchase it, but I'd rather
Yeah.
not be the one that does that process anymore.
Okay. Yeah, that I have seen some people in the space that start out grading because the 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 opportunity is there for that profit multiplier if you hit the right grades, but there's a lot less you can control in that situation other than just buying raw cards at 70%, selling them at 100%, or something like that. And there's, especially right now, I mean, I have a lot of cards out at all the different grading companies right now, and they've been there for months. And I don't know when they're going to come back because they haven't. So when it gets crazy like this, all the grading companies get backed up, and then there's your inventory. It's gone for months, and you're just sitting there twiddling your thumbs.
Yep,
Where
yep.
you don't have to worry about that. You just buy and sell and buy and sell and buy and sell, and you're good to go.
And maybe there's a sour taste in my mouth because when we were doing heavy submissions, it was during the time when PSA took about, a year to a year and a half to get everyone's
Mm,
submissions back because they were adding a new warehouse spot, I believe, in New Jersey at the time, and everything just became a mess to get back. And I know some people had to wait like 2.5 years to get their massive submissions back, of like
yeah.
2,000 cars or so. And I maybe it was just because of that that now I'm like, you know what? I don't need to worry about all that. It's nice to get them graded, especially when, because I'm an Umbreon and an Espeon collector at heart. And so there are a lot of things that I'll end up trying to send out to get graded just for my own personal collection. And man, you're right. When you don't know for certain, or when the estimated time on their website differs from what actually happens, it just causes so much headache personally that I'm
Yeah.
only going to do it for certain things at this point.
Yeah, it's a lot different, it's a few months ago before this crazy market took off, at the beginning of the year. At the end of last year, PSA was like 1 month turnaround. So it was like, yeah, that's awesome. I'll send a bunch of stuff off. But now it's like, ooh, it could be like 6 months now. It's like, do I really want to send this card? I don't know if it's going to get between an 8 to a 10. Do I really want it at PSA for 6 months when I could just sell it now for whatever profit margin and keep it pushing?
Yeah.
Yeah, you definitely have to double check that stuff and think about the timing and stuff on that for sure. Um, so another thing I want to talk about is Japan. That's kind of the main one of the main reasons I wanted to have you on was we talked a little bit at a recent local show about your Japan trip, and it's your first time going. I've been there a few times now. You went and bought some Pokemon cards, and it's been a little while since I went there and perused the shops. So I would love to talk to you about just your trip in general, and then your experience actually kind of shopping and buying Pokemon cards in Japan. So give us an overview of your trip. Where did you go? What cities did you stay? Sounded like you hit a bunch of different locations all over the country.
Yep. So I will say that I thankfully, although I've never been out of the country, I thankfully didn't have to do much planning on this one. It was more of a personal trip for my girlfriend and I. And Megan, I'm sure she's going to watch this. Like, she ended up planning quite literally everything on this trip for what we ended up doing. And thankfully, she left enough time for us to essentially, if we on the way to this this event or this other place that we're going to already scheduled, if we had time to hit hobby shops in between, then we'd be able to spend a couple hours if need be to go in those places and really scan through everything they had. Um, so we ended up staying in Ikebukuro, and that was basically our just home base for 2 weeks or so outside of a trip to Shirakawa, which was a really traditional mountainous area that's, I want to say, like 4 6 hours north of Tokyo.
Okay.
Very, very fun time, but very, very traditional at the same time. So most of the trips that we ended up going in Japan were, or in Tokyo, I guess, were just more or less all the stops on the JR line, if you remember the train stations. So we really enjoyed Ikebukuro, and I'm trying to remember one of the other ones. And of course, we went to Akihabara because that's the main, I guess, touristy spot to go
Yeah.
to if you're going to go to like hobby shops and electronic stores and stuff like that. Um, Ended up going to the Harry Potter Museum and a couple of other fun things. But I want to say in total, we probably found on our own, just like walking the streets and went to, I want to say like 15 or so different hobby shops or card shops in all those different towns. And it was definitely a fun experience compared to what it is here, the selection and the variety compared to what you would find at like a local show here, even in English, it really does surpass it in certain places and in certain towns.
Hmm. So you spent the majority of the time in Tokyo,
Yep, yep,
is what I.
majority of the time in Tokyo. I know that a lot of people say that Osaka is a really good hotspot for Pokemon hobby shops and
Hmm.
card shops as well. But we're, what was that, like 3 hours east of that for the most part.
Okay, cool. What were some of your favorite things that you guys did when you were there?
For me, just looking at everything back there, I have a big interest in pachinko, personal
Yeah.
interest in pachinko. So just being able to see parlors for the first time in person and just hearing the noises of, just hundreds of machines at certain points in the day going off at once, that was
Hmm.
really something that I got to check off my bucket list. And then I actually got surprised with a tour to Daikoku Circle, if you're into the car culture at all. It's a parking
Oh,
lot.
okay.
Yep, it's a parking lot where essentially every night there's a car meet there, and you get to see some of the wildest things that, especially here in North Carolina, you really don't ever get the chance to see, especially a whole parking lot full of them at once. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, it was a really, really great experience on those.
that's awesome. Um, so when we were talking at the show, you had mentioned that you were really impressed with, oh, it's the one that has a whole bunch of card shops around Tokyo. Which company was it again? The
Mandrake, was it?
Mandarake. Yeah, yeah. I think
Yeah.
that's what you mentioned. Yeah. Can you tell us what you liked about Mandarake? What the I guess the selection and inventory, what you were impressed by?
So with them, there were multiple locations, and I probably couldn't even count how many different locations there were all through the different towns, in different malls. I mean, there was a certain mall that we went to that I remember it was a four-story building. And although I think only two of them were card locations, quote unquote, that whole four-story mall was like halfway covered with different stores that were theirs, whether it was figures or comics or even like anime artwork and storybooks that you could find, and it was really incredible just how wide and vast their inventories were for anything. Um, and I guess what's cool to see is like they still care about Duel Masters, the card game, like crazy over there. And I think it was just completely forgotten about here after 2 or 3 years. But for Pokemon, they had just binders and binders of Pokemon stuff that you could go through, vintage all the way up through just about now, and just getting to see some of the card ass and the band ass just in multitudes in certain cases.
Mhm.
Though the prices weren't always the greatest, so to speak, it was nice to just see the collections that vast um, in multiple places around Tokyo.
Yeah. Yeah, I was actually gonna ask you about, prices wise. So, my experience, I went the one time that I went exclusively for Pokemon, it was right after they announced that the country was opening back up after COVID. So, right when they announced that tourists were gonna be able to come back, I basically booked a ticket for the next month, and I headed out there, and, I would say that I was very surprised because I think YouTube can paint a little bit of a different picture on your experience in card shops and maybe how good everything is and the good prices and the deals and all that stuff. And from my experience, it was definitely a situation where it was like I can source most of this better from my couch than taking all of this time to go to all these shops. So what was your experience with prices this time around? Was it any different? Was it similar? Or what do you think?
So I had, while I was there 2 weeks, I had about like 5 different people from Instagram end up reaching out to me and say, "Hey, like, how is it genuinely? Like, I've been debating booking a flight because I really want to go and I really want to go and see some of the shops too." But I can tell that mostly everyone at the end of the day is like, "How are the prices there?" And it really was more of a treasure hunt scenario more than, just the basic idea that you can just go to any store and the prices, they're going to be great no matter what location you go to, no matter what shop you go to. It's just this unrealistic expectation that I think has been painted a little bit.
Hmm.
For me, it definitely wasn't so much like, if anyone's trying to go and actually source stuff for good prices, don't go to Akihabara. Like, it's the worst place probably that you can go to, but it's the one place in Tokyo, at least, that is most talked about, and everyone
Hmm.
thinks that they can go there and just find everything for the cheapest prices. And yeah, they've got everything, but it's not going to be the place where, anything that's sought after, they understand just as much as you want to go over there and grab it. They know how bad that temptation is once you get there. So
Yeah.
that, sometimes I saw 2x, 3x prices, and there was a certain store that I'm not going to name, but I was looking at some of their sticker prices there, and it was a small little building. But I went online, tried to find comps, and what do you know? The same store, their website showed up, and it was noticeably cheaper. Like 50, 60% cheaper online, and it was just a very strange thing, and I just immediately walked out of it and went to the next place.
Yeah.
The stores that I found in smaller areas, definitely the ones that didn't seem to hike up the pricing so much. And though everything mainly vintage and, uh, I guess, Sun and Moon era and prior, it still has this premium that I guess a lot of stores over there, they'll just continue to do because, I mean, they're not going to be the types to grade either, but they also have the PSA premium more so on their sticker
Mm.
prices, than anything else. But if you were looking at just Pokeball reverses or some of the lower end stuff in modern, um, the smaller shops in areas outside of that, like, I mean, honestly, Ikebukuro was a good example. There's a hobby station that I continued going to, because there were relatively fair prices for all the things that, were not so much the things that everyone's going to come in there desiring, like EXs or like XY era EXs and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think especially like you're saying with Akihabara and some of those spots, they are they are tourist stores. Like they're trying to make a premium off of the fact that you're visiting there and you're going to want to buy cards in Japan. Because that is a heavy tourist area. Ikebukuro was the other place that I actually found a couple stores that I thought were very reasonable too. Like a lot of the stores have like the little bulk bins from all the different eras that you can sort through. And
Mhm.
there was one store that I found in Ikebukuro that had I think it was HDSS and Diamond and Pearl and EX Era, Ruby Sapphire, all that stuff. It was rares to commons, just rares to commons, but they were all near mint and they were all like a couple hundred yen. And I was like, ooh. So like that type of stuff is the stuff that you can kind of trip over. But yeah, I feel like, and one thing that I feel like you had a bit of an advantage over compared to my trips is that your girlfriend knows Japanese and can speak
Yeah.
Japanese. So
Yes,
that
it was.
probably helped a lot in communicating with the people in the store. One of the things that I kept running into was I always felt bad because one, there's a language barrier there. So and the more time that that person has to spend with you is more time that they're not with someone who might actually buy something, where I am going to be a lot pickier maybe than the next person. So a lot of times I'd find myself, I'd condition check like 5 cards and I'd be like, no, 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 no. And then I would start feeling like, oh my God, I'm just wasting this person's time. And then I would just walk away and be like, you know what? No, I'm good. Where I would like to hear what your experience was actually going with somebody who is fluent in Japanese and was able to talk to people in those shops.
It was true, and I thinking back, it really was a breeze. Like, it truly was just all I had to do was talk to her and say, "Out of this cabinet, can you just tell him I'd like to look at all of these?" And at the end of the day, all I had to do was a little bit of pointing and, like you said, condition checking over and over again, the yes and no. Um, but because of her being able to speak Japanese so well, we actually got to be able to look at one store that we went to a lot more in depth than I really expected to. Um, there was essentially a couple drawers that were right behind the checkout area that because I had already grabbed a good bit of some of the bulkier EXs and some of the full arts, they let me just essentially look through everything that they had in that area that was off limits to most of the typical customers. And I really don't think that would have happened unless I was with somebody that could fluently speak it. So that was a really nice advantage of it. But other than that, it felt more so just kind of swift. I would just, be able to point through most of the display cases and say, "Could I look at these?" To her, and she would more or less just have any problems resolved with the communication barrier. There were a couple of times where I had to look at her and she wouldn't know exactly how to say it, but it seemed like when I went and with everyone that was assisting me at least, just showing it on a Google Translate was more than enough for them to get the message.
Yeah. Yeah, they actually they have these little pocket translators too that you can rent. I think in the airport you could talk into it and then it talks. Google does a similar thing, but um they have different ways to help it. It's just it yeah, it definitely is a bit of a struggle for me. I hate time to me is one of the most like precious things and I hate wasting people's time and I hate when people waste my time. So it's like it's so I just feel so bad when I stand there and I'm looking at like the sixth card that I'm saying no to, and we're struggling to communicate. And we're doing all this stuff, and it's like, oh, I feel so horrible
Yeah.
that I end up just like walking away from probably potential opportunities because of that. But um, can you tell us a little bit about condition as well? We kind of talked a little bit about price, which was um, maybe not exactly what someone would expect potentially. But what about conditions? So they obviously have a lot of the stuff. You said they pretty much have everything. But in my experience, in some of the stores that I actually condition checked, some now when I went, I didn't understand the condition system at all. So I didn't understand the different colored stickers. I didn't understand like the A through Z, or not Z, A through S, F through S, whatever. Um, I wasn't aware of any of that. So I was just going full blind. Um, and it was rough. So but on a lot of those cards, were the conditions what you expected?
Because I was mainly focusing on more modern stuff that didn't have that, like, tourist, uh, upward momentum on it, like, sometimes 2 and 3x for basically anything that was nice. I just focused on the modern stuff that they had plenty of.
Mm,
And so I knew that the pricing on those were gonna be a lot better. But also because of that, the conditioning on them, because it was just printed in the past couple of years, I'd say the conditioning on all of them were just about stellar. There were a couple of, vintage cards like e-reader hollows and things like that, a couple of Delta Species EXs that I was looking at, and a lot of the time I did have to say no. As much as I wanted to, the pricing just didn't really match up to what the conditioning was. They definitely want top dollar for anything that is not printed in the last like 2 or 3 years.
yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. In a few years ago, I would say that I didn't see any graded cards in all these shops. I went back last year, I went to a couple shops when I went with my brother, a lot more PSA cards. Curious what your experience was. Did you see a lot of graded cards in a lot of the shops you went to? And, you know, just kind of tell us about that.
I would say out of a majority of the time, not a whole lot of graded cards at all. But if they did have it, it would be, like out of 6 or 8 display cases, it would just be 1 or half of a display case full of, graded cards. And it was a majority of PSA. There were really no other graded, companies that I saw. What I was kind of expecting to see, because it's talked about so much online, are, ARS slabs.
Mm, yeah.
And so because Megan was able to translate a little bit, I think I asked one of the shops about, if ARS slabs are, important over here, or if they're a thing, and he just kinda laughed. So in my head, I'm just kinda thinking, all right, for them, it's just another one of these lower, up and rising or attempting to up and rise grading companies that maybe us Americans are just a little bit more interested in because of the looks of them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting because I do kind of like the look of the slab, but I think the biggest problem that I saw, or I think was pointed out to me on their website, was that centering really isn't much of a criteria for that company when grading. So you can get some tens or some higher grades of some very off-centered looking cards.
Mm.
It doesn't seem to be something that they put a lot of emphasis onto. Maybe for their highest grades they do, but for a lot of the grades they don't. So you can see a lot of off center tens, which is a little strange to see a card that's so off center but still a 10. But yeah, very cool, different idea. It almost looks like a trophy, with the little plaque on the bottom. And with the grade being on the back, it kind of emphasizes the card. I like the idea behind it. It's just, yeah,
I do
very
too. Yeah,
interesting.
I like the idea, and there's a certificate that comes with those as well, right? And so
Yeah, I
that's a
think
that's
so.
a cool, unique addition with it. Though it may be a little bit tedious if you end up, switching your whole collection over to that, and then you need like a whole like legal binder full of all your your
True.
certifications. But
Yeah, exactly. Oh man, that'd be funny. You pick up someone's collection, they're like, "Oh, and here's all the certificates." All in a big binder. Oh man. So if you could boil down a few tips to somebody, like somebody that's coming to you and saying, "Hey, next week I'm flying out to Japan. I saw you just came back. What are some tips you'd give me on effectively shopping, at one of these card stores? What would some of those tips be?"
I would say to really, the first thing is, I guess, stay out of the tourist heavy areas. 9 times out of 10 in those spots, you're gonna end up being disappointed with not the quality of the cards most of the time. I mean, sometimes it is the condition, but most of the time it is the pricing of it that you're gonna be disappointed in. So I would say stay to like the smaller areas, or the smaller towns around, and just really look for any sort of hobby shop. There's not always just specifically Pokemon card shops. There's Gundam stores that will just have tons of figurines, and those can very easily have Pokemon cards in a little display case in the back of it. You just can't see it at all from the streets. So I would say smaller areas that aren't touristy heavy, and really just explore as much as you can. The smaller the store, it felt like the more fair the pricing was every time. And though the inventory of that place may not be too large and you may not find exactly what you're wanting, like, everyone wants to go into a store and find a gold star or something like that. Just
Yeah.
kill that expectation. They're
Yeah.
just as much unicorns to be able to see in person up for sale as they are sometimes here at shows. Because as soon as you do see one, it's very quickly snagged by somebody else in the process, right? So
Yeah.
I would say lower the expectations if you're going. Don't just go out there for business. I think the reason I enjoyed it so much was because we did have a blend of personal reasons to be there, but also enough time in the middle to go to these places and explore a little bit. Not necessarily pull the trigger at every place that we went to, but just getting to see that wide variety. It was definitely nice, but learned a lot too in terms of just how widespread it is for pricing across these different places.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm so glad that you said that because whenever someone comes to me and says, "Hey, should I fly to Japan to go buy the Japanese cards?" I always tell them, "You should go to Japan because you want to go to Japan and you want to experience Japan. And then when you're there, if you're walking past the card shop, go in, check it out. Maybe you'll find something to buy. But you should be there for the food and the temples and the museums and all the cool stuff that you can experience in Japan, not just there for cards, or else you're going to drive yourself crazy probably. And you're
Absolutely.
not going
Well,
to experience.
you're not gonna get to enjoy it as much nearly, right? If you end up going there just to end up doing these transactions the whole time, you're really not getting to enjoy the place that you're even at, you know?
Yeah,
Enjoy what you're doing. Just enjoy the ramen that you get to have or the udon that you've never gotten to try before authentically or and all that kind of stuff.
yeah.
Or a whole bunch of gotcha machines if you want.
True. Was there a big, because you said it was your first time even out of the country, let alone first time in Japan. Was there a big culture shock when you got there, like trying to figure out the trains and doing all that? And what was the experience? Because I definitely had culture shock. I'd been out of the country, but not to a place where I didn't know the language. So it was, and I went alone the first time. It was just like, just gonna go and experience, and whatever happens, happens. Hopefully, I get home. um, but yeah, for you, what was? Did you have any culture shock moments where you're like, oh man, I am.
The first day and a half really took me some time to get adjusted to everything there. But again, thankfully with Megan there, it was genuinely a breeze. She's been I think this was her 3rd time going.
Okay.
And so she's, you know, she's done the rope, she's been on the train system, she's gotten her Suica card, all that good stuff, and you know, it really did feel like a breeze with her. Um, but I would say about a week into it, it started getting familiar. You know, you got to go here. It's roughly going to be like one of these two platforms that we got to get on to go wherever we're going next. And although it was a huge shock at the beginning, I really do enjoy the way that they've got everything laid out there. It's so tight, cram packed on the streets. And I mean, there are, you know, just skyscrapers of buildings with different things going on at every floor, but the infrastructure and the way that they've got their transportation, it really does work very well.
Yeah, every train is on time. If it's not on time, it's like 2 seconds late. Like it's all right there. It's every like 3 minutes a new train comes by. Um, and yeah, you can literally just walk or take the train anywhere. It gets, like you said, it gets super easy just after a couple days. Once you get the Google, navigation going, and you start to figure out the Suica card and everything, you really get moving, and you can like you spent 2 weeks just in Tokyo. Well, with a day trip or an overnight trip, up north. But there's a lot to experience just in Tokyo that you can do in full 2 weeks. And you
Yep.
probably won't even see it all.
No,
But
no, I know that there was a lot that she wanted to do, but just because of schedule conflict, we couldn't really do everything. The Disney thing we didn't end up doing, which I know a lot
mm,
of people end up going to do, but we subbed that in for the Harry Potter place instead, and I'd say that was well worth it.
yeah, that's awesome. That's cool. Let's go back to business a little bit. We'll
Mhm.
we'll fly out of Japan. We'll go back to business a little bit. So a couple of questions I'm gonna be asking a lot of the people during these 30 days, 30 conversations, is a lot of the people I'm going to be talking to they have side businesses or they're full time in Pokemon. So I wanted to ask them, what what has been your best and what has been your worst play? What was like a big buy that you thought was going to be great that didn't turn out so great? What was a big buy that you knew was going to be great and you were super excited about?
The worst one, I thankfully can say that I haven't really found a bad snag on a deal yet. I haven't really gotten hit with a scam or anything like that. Thankfully, dealing with online purchases, even though I know that's, you know, a very, very easy thing to happen. Thankfully, I've stayed away from anything sour like that going on. Um, I guess probably it wasn't necessarily a bad deal, but it was one that ended up kind of dragging out for a couple of years on something that at the end of the day, I did as much as I could on it, but still, the customer was quite unhappy with how it turned out at the end of the day.
Mm,
It was back during, I think, like 2020, 2021. It was a local who had his old vintage binder of cards, and he wanted to go ahead and get rid of it for some extra cash. So yeah, I want to say the most noteworthy thing out of it may have been Erica's Venusaur.
Hmm.
or like a base set 2 Venusaur, one of the two.
Okay.
So it was some nice little hollows here and there, but regardless, about 9 months later, I got contacted about it, just kind of saying, "Hey, I would like these back."
Mm.
Um, and that's a very tough snag to run into. It's
You'd
not
already
normal.
purchased
I've never
them
really dealt with it
and
since.
everything?
Sorry?
You'd already purchased the binder and everything?
Oh, yes. Yep, yep. Handed the check off to him, months and months prior. And suddenly it was
Huh.
the nostalgia of these cards, I really like them back. And so I made it clear, like, it's been 9 months. Singles work very quick in and out with us here, so they're gone.
Mhm.
Um, we could work on getting you replacement ones. They're not going to be exactly yours, but I still had pictures of what the cars were that he sold to us were. So I could have replaced them in some sense, but it ended up going sour, and he didn't really respond after that. But then every year or so, I'll get a message from him saying, like, "I want my cards back." And at a certain
Huh.
point, you can only do but so much, right?
Yeah, that is kind of weird. That is a that is an interesting transaction, I'll give you that. I don't think I've ever had anyone ask me for their stuff back 9 months later. That's interesting.
It was a
Um,
weird position to be put in, and because I knew it was, kind of small and nostalgia driven, I wanted to try and help as much as I could. But at a certain point, it's like, man, you got to realize when you sell something, there's not really much of a guarantee about getting it back. Like,
right,
yeah, you
like
could sell something to a pawn shop and hope it stays there for a little bit so you can get it back later, but it's not a guarantee at all.
yeah. Yeah, you can't just return it. You can't just, like yeah. Okay, interesting. Um, and then do you have, like, a best play, like, one that you just, like, knocked it out of the park, home run?
I think that's going to be this year, quite honestly. There's been a lot of things going on, and I don't really want to talk too much about it, but we've been trying to expand as much as we can here lately, and there's a lot of support in the local area with us at this point. After being in the local scene for like 2 years, it really does feel like it's where we should be, and we're just going to keep expanding on that. At the show that we actually just saw each other at not too long ago, we did quite a number of deals there for
Oh,
buying
that's awesome.
opportunities, and it'll be a solid bit of just about like every era. And we can normally say that for like a week or two, and then most of it's sold. But I think this time it's going to be quite a long time to where we can say, yeah, we can help out with just about anything for a little bit, which is different.
That's awesome.
And
Yeah,
you can
that's
find that
cool.
still in slabs and something like that, but to just have singles of it, it's nice to be able to say, yeah, just do whatever you need to fill your own collections up, master sets of whatever it is, whatever era.
Yeah, super cool. So you made it sound like is there more to your operation than you and your girlfriend at this point? Do you have people who help out or employees or
There's been help slash a team of us kind of trying to keep the train chugging here for a while. Back in 2021, I want to say was really when I felt like TCG Player was going really well. I wanted to continue doing, at the time, it was just claim sales on Instagram, but I wanted to continue building to something more than just that. And I was hoping to eventually get to a streaming platform. That
Mm,
still hasn't happened, but that's okay. If it ends up working out, it'll come in time. But for a while, I did have another set of hands, but they're no longer with us. There's definitely been help along the way the whole time. I want to say that TCG player side is the side where I've had really, you could say one person putting in about 20 hours a week to help out there, and then a couple of other people that come in and just help sleeve every now and then for 5 or 6 hours here and there. Um, but it's definitely the TCG player side of it that needs that extra help. With the vending at local shows, yeah, for the most part, me and my girlfriend, we can handle it ourselves, 2 or 3 tables, and although it gets hectic at times, that's all the help that it's really needed there. But on the back end of
yeah.
TCG player, or if we end up ever doing Instagram claim sales again, That kind of stuff, it definitely demands a lot more attention or help on the side of it.
Okay. Cool. Um, yeah, I feel like at shows I only ever see you and your girlfriend, so it's interesting to hear that you've got a lot more help around the TCG player side of things. That's interesting. Um, have you guys ever thought about opening a store? Is that something that has yeah?
Thought about it, wanted to for God, 3 years now, probably. The idea is there, right? It's up there in the skies still, and we're slowly building our staircase to whether or not we really want to go that route. It's been
Mm.
a back and forth for me for so long. I would love to. I would hate to right now. I would love to. Oh, we gotta wait a little bit longer. 3 stores just opened in Raleigh. This other store down here just closed down. Like, it just watching everything dynamically play out here with how many stores there are just in the Raleigh, Cary, Apex, just that triangle area, it's hard for me to say, "Yes, we're gonna get a store going," because we've talked to a lot of different places, and there's been a couple that have said, "Y'all are probably going the smarter route, just keeping it, strictly speaking, online for what you're doing, and then for your local stuff, yeah, just do shows. Don't do stuff that has overhead rent." Um, and because it really does play into it a lot more once you have a whole space that you have to start paying for much more than, just typically anything else. $200 max maybe at a local show for your tables, or potentially 6, 12 grand a month for a place you're renting out or leasing.
Yeah, it's something that I've thought about too since getting back in and doing the business in Pokemon. And I actually I had a lot of my stuff up at a local comic book store in like a little consignment area of the shop, and it was outselling the comics because eventually the comic used book store actually shut down at the end of last year because he was just couldn't make it work. Um, and I had been in talks like, okay, what's going on with this store? I've been selling Pokemon cards here for 2 years. Like, let me get in there. And then there's some ownership issues and stuff. So everything's kind of in limbo. But so I don't know if that will ever happen. But I definitely see your point because last year a hobby store, which is like video games, and they carry Pokemon and other trading card games, literally opened up across the street from that shop. So it's like, uh, you know, and as it becomes more and more popular, more of these shops are just going to pop up for sure. So
Yep. And
it,
then the real question too is, yeah, they can pop up all they want. When it becomes like the reasoning that a lot of stores had to close back 2019, 2020, when that kind of dip comes back around for everybody in terms of just like getting people in the door, it's another story that I just would rather not take the risk, and that's the
yeah.
biggest thing. I've always wanted to do it. I see the benefits of it, no doubt, but I'd rather not take the risk knowing that, I mean, it can quite literally take out every store in the area when things go sour.
Well, and it seems like you're almost getting, with as many shows as you guys do, and as known as you are locally, you're almost getting the benefit of a store without having to have the store. You're in front of people. You have people in the area already coming to you with stuff to sell. Like that's kind of one of the big benefits is the collections that walk through the door. But if you give yourself a name locally, like you guys have, you get those benefits already. So, and yeah, I have a couple of friends that own stores in different places, and they're absolutely like, if you're killing it online, do not open a store. Like they're so adamant, like absolutely do not. Even though it seems like it would be so much fun. It's vending every day.
It is. It is
But
vending every day, and it does sound really fun. But then I also think about how exhausted I have been on 3-day shows or things
oh
like
yeah.
that. And it's like, okay, maybe it's better this way.
Yeah. Yeah, true. Very true.
I also have like a day job outside of this whole thing. I'm
Oh,
not like one of the guys that are completely full time Pokemon. I've helped a lot of people, logistically to figure out if they can or if they should. And to those that go full time Pokemon, like power to y'all. Really,
Yeah.
power to y'all. Glad you can. But I end up taking a little bit of my time towards a day job instead. So I work with a hospital in the area as a IT platform admin as well. So
Nice.
that might be the reason that I haven't really been able to go and branch out to all the different social media platforms. Whereas, just Instagram, that's where the base has been for so long, and don't really have a whole lot of time most of the weeks to go and post as much as I'd like or make content as much as I would want to. But it's still very much, to where we've been around so long that thankfully people respect us and appreciate us being around enough to where it, it really does feel like a family on Instagram. I don't know if you feel that way, but I absolutely love that platform.
Yeah, Instagram is definitely like the best social media platform for Pokemon stuff. I think I think it's one of the best social media platforms. Period. I think the rest of them are pretty rough, but yeah, Instagram is pretty solid. I was gonna ask, I totally forgot if you were full time or not, but that you're in very similar position to me. I have a full time position. Pokemon's the side thing. Feels like a full time thing sometimes. Um, it's basically having two full time jobs. Let's be
It
real.
really is. That's the way I explain it to a lot of people most of the time because I ask, they're like, "How much time do you really have to put towards it?" And I'm like, as much as I can, really. I mean, at the end of the day, it's you try and hit 40 hours to, just get things scanned in or inventory stuff adjusted and try and, fine comb the details of the next event. But sometimes, if you can power through as much as you can, because for us at least, it feels like it's never ending. You can always get more
Yeah.
done, but with another day job, you just got to limit yourself sometimes. And that's what I'm still trying
Yep.
to learn after like 5 years of doing this.
Yeah. Yep. Well, I think we'll wrap it up here. I appreciate you, Jeepster. Thank you very much for hopping on and telling us all about your recent trip and your business and all sorts of stuff. And let the people know where they can find you and support your endeavor and store and your Pokemon journey.
Yeah, I would say the really one and only place that we've got right now, if you want to get in touch with us or just see what we're working on, it would be Instagram. Instagram's at Jeepster Cards, and we've got a link tree in there if you want to hop into our Discord. Every now and then we try and have some stuff going on in there, but yeah, I would say Instagram's the easiest place to get a hold of us or just see when we're going to be at a show in an NC town.
Yeah, and guys, I know that there are quite a few of you that are in the Raleigh NC area that go to these shows. If you are there and you see Jeepster, definitely go over there and check out what he's got because he's always got good stuff. Well, thank you very much, man. I appreciate it. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you for having me, man.